Week 9, Value, Interior Space. So I'm starting the drawing just the way I would start any drawing, by measuring, by taking angles. The important thing in a value drawing is that you're not making hard, long lines. You're sort of making dotted lines. And they're taking a measurement, making a map of the layout of the interior space, keeping things movable and light, but also making little points of measurement so that I'm not making a coloring book effect. The next thing, you start to lay down value. I've started with that big dark shape in the foreground to kind of give me a measurement of where all the other values should be in alliance. If you look at the value chart at the top of the page, which I recommend just attaching to your working page so that you can say, yeah, that's a number 9. That dark shape is really not all the way to the number 10 that I have in the value chart. Like in the value chart, one of the important things is making a tone flat. So you're laying down the material using vine charcoal, you're using, you can use compressed charcoal, charcoal pencil, the stump, your eraser. All these things are used in tandem to try to make the value a very specific flat note, just again like you have in the value chart. So you can see that I'm moving the material. Once I apply it, I am now using a charcoal pencil and I'm applying the material, and then I come back either with my hand, the stump, the eraser, and I pull that material together so it establishes a flat shape that is a distinct note. So I can say, yeah, this is a number 4 that I'm applying right now. I'm also working in a way where, for example, the back wall, I'm trying to keep all of my marks symmetrical to one another so that the viewer can understand that that's one plane, so that there is a distinction between drawing angles from one shape to another shape. Again, I'm pulling things together, I'm making the notations, so I've established some of my darkest darks, and it is much more nuanced as you continue to work, that you can see the difference between, let's say, a number 2 and a number 3. There's a little shadow on the floor. Now I'm getting some of my darker shadows that are in relationship to where the light is coming from. It's very important in any drawing where you're working in value to get rid of the white of the page. You're saving the white of the page only where the brightest light is. I haven't quite gotten to that place in this drawing yet. I've got the tone of the floor, I've got the front plane of the box where the objects are sitting. Now I'm starting to work on the left side again to establish where that chair is, and to notice that the chair is not really, even though it is white, the fabric and the material, it doesn't have a direct light on it. So I have to start to modulate that area and get the white of the page sort of under control so it reads as being light. Now what I'm doing here is kind of one-point perspective. The lines I'm drawing on the floor radiate the direction as if all of these lines are going to meet in the middle. You can see how that pushes the floor back into space. I'm working now in the center this is where the brightest light is and also the darkest shadows. You can see that I'm working throughout the entire page. I'm not working in one little area. I've worked to get and establish the quality of the light and the atmospheric light in the entire room. So it's far from being the opposite of working in a coloring book where you outline a shape and then you work only within that little area. What you're doing, in effect, is you're working throughout the entire page, and one thing is in relationship to another. So that dark chair is maybe the darkest that I have in the entire composition, and it starts to make the dark plane in the foreground much more like, let's say, a number 8 value, maybe a number 9, but I've got that dark chair is absolutely the darkest. So when I'm coming through, I'm working with line here because the element that I'm drawing, which is the edge of the chair, is a linear element. Otherwise, I'm really trying to stay away from making a line. I'm always making, let's say, shapes out of different values. I'm looking to see the way that the shapes move back into space. So the wall, I am drawing with vertical and horizontal lines, whereas the floor, I'm making radiating lines. If you pay attention to that, the way that all the lines on the floor are coming back to a single point, that makes the floor plane more believable. The other thing that is true about value drawing, it takes time. You're building things in a way where things are layered, and it takes a good amount of time to build those layers to establish the nuances. For example, a floor which seems like, oh my goodness, there's not that much to draw. That's almost the hardest thing to draw because there's small differences in the way that the light hits that big plane and the way that the shadow moves back into a darker value as it approaches the wall, and there's a lot of things that are overlapping. It's in shadow underneath the chair, for example. So at this point in the drawing, the values are pretty much in place in that I have a little bit of white in that chair on the left side, but most of the light that I have left is from the light of that strong studio light that I've shined onto the couple of objects on the table. And you notice also that the chair, the dark chair, it's almost like a silhouette against that white wall. And it continues to be a main feature of the drawing. As I continue to build things in layers, I have more opportunity to make smaller changes. The main thing about drawing in value, and just to repeat, I'm using lots of different tools here. Right now I'm using an eraser to get rid of that line that I had put in. A line at the edge of a value makes it flat. That's why you want to avoid it. Things in nature continue to go around. If you look at the room that you're sitting in, you'll see that shapes of values, there's no big line at the edge of it. It's soft but specific. And that's the challenge in drawing in value, which is that you want to make things not hard edge, but you do want to make them a specific shape. That's why the eraser is such a good tool. That's why the charcoal pencil is such a good tool, because it can make a smaller shape. I'm right now making the front plane of this dark shape, which happens to be a piece of black foam core. I think that working in value is also a bit like carving. So I feel myself carving around the form and trying to establish value by getting the relative light and value in relationship to one another correct. So if something is very bright, it can't read as being bright unless you get the value behind that brightness established. It's really the shadow and the dark and the midtones that make something bright feel like it's glowing. So at this point in the drawing, it's getting pretty close to being finished. I could continue to work on it if I wanted to, but I feel like there's a quality of light in the room, an atmospheric light, as well as the shapes of the elements within the room having kind of a presence where things are sitting on the floor and you get a feeling of where the light is coming from. This is the finished drawing, and you can see that it's not the whole page. You have to start with something that you can do in a shorter period of time. So I believe that I took 5 inches off the left and the right side. Make a smaller rectangle to begin so that you have an opportunity to finish.